Why you probably never heard about the Reshef meat grinder. Now, the Reshef meat grinder is a name given to by the Soviet soldiers, and recently a book was published by a Russian author, historian called the Rzhev Slaughterhouse, and it covers the forgotten campaigns of around January 1942 to March 1943 by the Red Army against the Rzhev Salient. Rzhev was an important town that had an important railway connection to Smolensk and to Moscow and everything, and it was basically after Barbarossa and the counterattacks by the Soviets in winter 1941-42, this stuck out and was the most closest to Moscow. So one author pointed out it's like a sword pointed at Moscow. So this was the furthest, the farthest the Wehrmacht basically got or held a position. And the Soviets tried several battles and campaigns against it to retake it. Now, the major issue is the whole battle is basically rarely mentioned, or the whole battles around it are rarely mentioned anywhere. So usually they cover everything, Stalingrad of course, and Bagraton and everything, but this is more or less, both in the Soviet literature as in the German one, is more or less, well, a side topic, not necessarily a footnote, but it's not rather extensive. If you look at the table of contents, it sometimes comes up, sometimes not with the name. So the question is why, or several questions why. I mean, the first of course is maybe it was unimportant, because we know on the Eastern Front, vast areas, a lot of casualties, a lot of tanks and equipment and everything, so maybe it was, compared to Stalingrad, just a minor battle or something. So as pointed out, the Rzhev Salient was a direct threat to Moscow. And additionally, Heeresgruppe Mitte was basically in charge there, and it was the strongest Heeresgruppen, the strongest army group. And Reshef was also seen to a certain degree as the shortest way into the Reich, as similar to the destruction of Heeresgruppe Mitte. Now the common view for 1942 is mainly, we look at Stalingrad, we look at Case Blue, the German summer offensive of Army Group South in the southern area, and against Stalingrad and then Caucasus. And you see this, and you see basically, well, the Germans are on the attack again. What is completely forgotten is that actually the Red Army was attacking during summer 1942 in the area of Army Group Center, and they tried to destroy the Rzhev Salient and Heeresgruppe Mitte. So it was not a minor battle at all. And to give you just some numbers, for the Red Army, the 1942 reinforcements were for the center area 3.46 million, and for the southern area where Stalingrad and everything happened, 3.26 million. So the amount of reinforcements sent to center were higher than those to the south. It should also be noted that the Soviets and Stalin expected an attack against Moscow. Even when Army Group South attacked, they assumed that they would swing up from the south against Moscow. So a lot of focus was given to the center and also at destroying this salient. Now, additionally, the Rzhev Salient was a threat towards Moscow to a certain degree, but it also bound a lot of German forces due to the attacks by the Red Army. Additionally, on the logistical side, which is very important on the Eastern Front, very important railway connections were running through this area. Now, to put it in perspective to Stalingrad, in November 1942, when the counteroffensive by the Soviets started Operation Uranus to basically encircle the 6th Army and also parts of the 4th Panzer Army, in the center there were 2.5 million Red Army personnel located, whereas in the south only 1.1 million. And in the center, 4,260 tanks, where in the south only 1,460 tanks. For aircraft, the disparity was not that big, it was only 1,400 in the center and 960 in the southern area. So in other words, at the height of the counteroffensive against the Wehrmacht in the Stalingrad area, the Red Army had way more manpower and equipment located still in the center area. Now, if we look at this data and the importance of the location and also the importance of the logistics and the political situation, it makes little sense that we rarely hear about these battles and these campaigns. So why was it forgotten? Now the author of Reshef Slaughterhouse points out that there are various ideological reasons there from the Soviet side. So if you look at the Soviet historiography, it's basically these operations were also painted in a very positive light, whereas there were various errors and blunders committed, and the reviews, she looked at the reports and everything, and she also pointed out, yeah, a lot of concealing was going on. Additionally, one of these operations was Operation Mars, which is often not mentioned with name and which is usually described as Zhukov's greatest defeat. Zhukov, Marshal Zhukov, one of the most well-known Soviet marshals during the Second World War. And officially, the Soviets put it into the Battle of Moscow. So this was part of the Battle of Moscow. She actually looked at the terminology and everything and pointed out this doesn't make sense because the Battle of Moscow ends at a certain point, and so there's an overlap. And so it doesn't really add up. Now the issue here is this can't be the sole reason. Why? Because we have a similar problem in Germany, in German literature. These battles are rarely mentioned. They're rarely covered. And for the most part, the Germans were successful there. So there's no need to conceal anything, and also the political climate was a different one. So what is it all about? I mean, the Germans always focus on Case Blue and Stalingrad, yeah? And Reshef, they basically held the position for the most part. There were minor breaks in the front line and everything, and they also suffered high losses, as did the Soviets. But yeah, that's nothing new, which, I mean, they suffered tremendous losses also in Stalingrad, so why not mention it? And I personally think it comes a bit down to two other factors. And one is, it's too contrary to the conventional view. So our conventional view is, in 1942, Case Blue, Fall Blau happens, the Germans are on the attack again in the summer. And this is, when you look at anything about 1942, usually it's Germans attack. Stalingrad happens. This is 1942 on the Eastern Front. Rarely anyone speaks about what happened in the center, which were the Rzehv Battles. So we don't actually see that during the summer the Soviets were attacking again and again and again. Or when it's mentioned, it's slightly mentioned. I mean, there are few pages in the Germany in the Second World War about the Rzehv battles, and it's mentioned. But in comparison to the pages written on Case Blue and on Stalingrad, yeah, it's a bit quite a disparity there. So then there's the point that Hitler listened to his generals and actually withdrew and gave the alliance to withdraw the Rzhev Salient. This breaks basically with the trope of Hitler never listened to his general and always gave stand fast orders and always was about just holding the ground and everything else. It doesn't fit in this simplified narrative many people like to follow. So it doesn't fit in the general thing. So Germany attacked again, and Hitler ordered not to withdraw and everything around this. So it doesn't fit into this very conventional and simplified view. And I think another major issue is that if you compare it to Stalingrad again, the amount of drama is limited under very heavy quotation marks because the amount of losses and suffering was extensive and very completely comparable to Stalingrad in Case Blue. Yet it was very anticlimactic if you look at it. So for this we need to take a basic structural look at the Battle of Stalingrad and then at the structure of the Rzehv Battles. So if we look at Stalingrad first, it's basically the Wehrmacht attacks again in summer 1942, and then the Luftwaffe attacks Stalingrad, hits the city hard. The Germans arrive there, the German army arrives, there's fighting in the city, there's fighting for each house, constant counterattacks, city is completely destroyed, Germans almost take Stalingrad, there's fighting already near the Volga and everything. Then there's Pavlov's house, and then happens the major Soviet counterattack. They break through on the flanks, and the 6th Army and parts of the 4th Panzer Army get encircled. Then Hitler is against the breakout. We have also a scapegoat, we have Paulus, then there's the airlift, and finally the 6th Army and the 4th Panzer Army are destroyed. Then there's also a bit of Operation Wintergewitter, the relief effort to a certain degree is also a bit of action there. And also, if you look at the result, it's a decisive Soviet victory and a decisive defeat for the Germans. And on top of that, you have the name Stalingrad, probably one of the most symbolic names ever. And it also involves one of the leaders of the two factions. So let's look at the basic structures of the battles of Reshef. So the Soviet counterattack happens in winter 1941-1942. They drive major parts of the Germans back, but the Germans held at Reshef, this area, and helped the salient that threatens Moscow. Then the Soviets attack the first time. Germans still hold, but there are a few holes now, paratroopers and everything, but the Germans go ahead and clear out the pockets and the salient is stabilized again. Then the Soviets attack again, the Germans hold. Soviets attack again, the Germans hold. Finally, German army withdraws and the Soviets attack. They want to destroy the 9th Army. Yet the 9th Army, unlike the 6th Army, survives. And for the most part, the operation for the Germans was a full success. Finally, still, the Soviets clear out the salient. So the front is shortened for the Germans and for the Soviets as well. So it takes a way longer duration and is less decisive, and Stalingrad was very short and decisive. Additionally, about the whole Reshef campaigns and battles, you can argue who was winning in the end, because the main goal of the Soviets was always to destroy Heeresgruppe Mitte, or large parts of it, and get the salient. They didn't destroy Heeresgruppe Mitte, but in the end they got the salient. So one could argue who actually won in the long run and also at what specific point you look. So in other words, if you look at Reshef, it's a long period, it's very undecisive for both sides, and it's a muddling around. Whereas for Stalingrad, it's pretty sharp and clear. So it's very easy to digest and put a structure in there. It's short and decisive and major blow after major blow, basically. To conclude, why you probably never heard about the battles of Reshef. Now at first the ideological reason sounds very convincing. But I think this only holds to a certain degree for Russia and the former Soviet Union. For Germany it makes no sense. I can't see why German military historians would put it under the rug or something. The only thing what I can see, it's rather hard to grasp because it's rather large and it's also between the campaigns. So basically there's the counteroffensive against Barbarossa. So winter 1941-1942. And then everyone focuses on Case Blue and Stalingrad because this is where everyone, okay, what were the errors, what got wrong and everything else. Whereas Reshef mostly held. And then in 1943, when Operation Buffalo happens, when the evacuation happens, everyone is already at Kursk again. So it's a big battles and major timeline and everything, a major duration. It's kind of like the big guy that didn't fit into the picture. So you cut him out in the end. He's on the side and oh, we cut off his head. So yeah, cut him out completely to a certain degree. And the other aspect is, of course, the whole structure of it. It's not a climatic and story to a certain degree of narrative like that of Stalingrad. And there are also some points that go against the common narrative. So it doesn't fit in for some people, like, okay, it more or less gets a bit forgotten. So my conclusion is it's kind of weirdly structured and it doesn't fit in the conventional structure we have from the Eastern Front timelines. Big thank you here to Czech for sending me Thunder in the East, the Reshef Slaughterhouse and several David Glantz books. These books were used but not harmed in the making of this video. Thank you for watching and see you next time.